Okay, people. So I am joined by Arthur Ian, the writer and director of Crossing. Arthur, thank you very much for your time, man. I appreciate you stopping by. How's it all
Thanks for
going?
having me.
No problem at all. So, Crossing, right? You decided to make a drama, but it's based around events in your own life, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, it's based upon some events in my life and in my generation. I'm one of those people who left the Soviet Union shortly before it fell apart, having survived the Cold War and moved to the West, to the United States. And then some of the things happened that you saw in the movie, and I thought they would be worthy of artistic reproduction.
Mm. So, what made you decide to go drama over documentary?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, well, I mean, once all of this happened, thinking back about it, I couldn't have made a documentary at that point. But I guess, you know, having lived in both worlds, having lived in the East, having lived in the West, having gone through the Cold War and the 90s, the era when uh, basically the relationship between the two countries, the US and Russia, improved so much, with stark contrast to what we're seeing right now.
Mm.
So, having gone through all of that, I think it gave me just a lot to think about and inspired me to write about humanity and the human ties, ties between people and just basic human qualities, such as compassion and understanding, things that transcend national boundaries and political boundaries. And having gone through that experience, through the financial crisis and being stuck in a hospital with my dad and seeing all this amazing compassion and help and solidarity we were getting from the doctors in DC, and just kind of living on a fence, between your past and your present and the two worlds, I guess gave me a lot to think about, and I thought maybe it would be worthy of a script and then a feature film.
Mm. Mm. So, when you were kind of devising all of this, right, what kind of, did you have any thought of the start point, right? Where to kind of bring people in so they can connect with all of this?
Well, I tried to do it as professionally as I could. So I read a lot of books about writing scripts, and some of them were very, very helpful. I had a mentor from the American Film Institute in LA, a wonderful lady who helped me very much. I also worked with a guy from UCLA, the writing department at UCLA. So I knew that I can't rush the script. So I wrote many, many versions of it. There were a lot of revisions, and I was showing it to my friends, showing it to my coaches, and just really tried to perfect it as much as possible. And I think that part went well because I really benefited from a lot of criticism that I got, critique rather, and a lot of suggestions. It took over a year, but I think that's great. As one of my coworkers said, it's much cheaper to edit on paper than to edit once you've shot the film. Much,
True.
much cheaper. Thousands times, thousands of times.
Yeah. So, like, because this is your, am I correct? This is your first writing credit.
Yes, it's my first script. It's the first one I've written. I've done a documentary before, but not a
Yeah.
feature film.
Looking for Romeo, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. Um, so, right, what made you decide to write this? You know what I mean? Because it's just like, I think oftentimes people work with writers, you know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
how, why did you think, okay, I'm gonna write and direct it? Because that's putting a lot on your shoulders, man.
That is true. That is true. Well, I made some friends in Los Angeles. One of them was a young writer from Spain, and I really wasn't going to write the script. I just shared with him, some of the events that happened to me in my life, and he said, "Oh, it's great. I can, take a stab at it. I can try to write a script based on those events." But he started doing that, and he kind of faded away. So I had to step in and finish it. And then I realized this is something that, if you, I didn't want to delegate. I mean,
Mm.
there are things that you delegate, like cinematography. I am willing to learn. I'm a first time director. I know I have to learn from people. So when I speak with a cinematographer, I can just tell him approximately what I think I see in the shot and then tell him about the backstory and the feelings, the emotional kind of content of the scene. And then I trust the cinematographer with deciding, making some decisions and showing me some things. But writing, I guess it's very close to home for me. So I decided that one part I'm not going to let go. That and working with actors. I think that those are the two things that for me were very, very important. And I think, I mean, I can't really give people advice because I don't really have a lot of experience. But this was a long process. This film, I was working on it for many years. I think that's one of the most important things for an indie director is to really work on the script. It has to be an amazing script, and you have to have amazing actors. That's very important. Casting and writing, the two things that are very, very important. I mean, there are many things that are important, but I would just single out these two.
Mm. No, that's true. And I do think when a story is like personal to you,
Right.
you are probably the only person that's able to really get that emotion how it was, right? You can tell someone, well, these events happened, but they can write something that could be good, but they're not going to be able to really drill down into that raw emotion of those particular moments. So,
Right.
yeah, I can see
Right.
why you would want to, handle that yourself.
And it's not easy. Writing is not easy. I don't believe in writing when you don't have an idea or you don't have the inspiration to do it. I believe in really taking it from life, just
Mm,
being with people, listening to people, watching things unfold around you, kind of taking it from the universe around you. And everybody has his or own style. It's very personal. Dialogue, for example, very, very tough to write good dialogue, and this is something I kind of challenged myself to do it, and I hope it came out all right.
yeah, no, no, no. I do think the dialogue did feel real because that's a problem. Like sometimes if you get, "Hi, Fred." "Yes, Tim. How are you?" And it just
That's
feels
right.
very
That's right.
stilted, and you're just like, "Oh, people do not talk like that." Like they're meant to be
Yeah.
relatives. I don't feel an emotional vibe between anyone.
A lot of times it's very predictable, linear, and it feels like it was written by a computer. I mean, you
Mm.
can see that someone was just typing these lines just to get this done and rush it. So I tried to really take my time with it and make it very authentic and bring it to life, take it from life.
Yeah. So did like the process for you kind of involve talking to family and having like those conversations, kind of
Oh yeah.
revisiting like these periods of your life with other people that were around so you can really kind of get back into that headspace?
Yeah, I think it's like mining, it's like there are all these specks of gold out there. You just have to go and mine for them. You have to find them and filter them. I kind of sometimes feel like, the big guy upstairs already wrote the script. You just need to go and learn like from him, learn, and find the things that he already did put in place. And that's how you write your script. I have this kind of mystical approach to it. Sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and I have a couple of lines in my head
Mm.
is I've seen something at night in my dreams and like it prompted a line, or I'm in the middle of a conversation, or I'm in a gym and something just goes off. A lamp goes off in my head, and a lot of these characters are real. So I just had to observe some of my colleagues, some of my family members, and take all these quirky parts out of them. I mean, Ellen was one of the most likable characters in the film. I spent some time with her, just followed her around, talked to her about her life, wrote down some details, and then I just had to observe her in life. So she came out all right, I think. So did the mother's character. Very funny.
Mm.
So yeah.
Oh, where are you? I'm standing outside hotel like vacancy.
Vacancy. Yeah, this is a real thing. It actually happened. She made me wait by the Vacancia Hotel near Stanford campus, and I spent like an hour bicycling all over Palo Alto, and I couldn't find it. The poor old lady. She thought it was called Vacancy Hotel. Yeah, she's full of quirks like this. You just have to observe my mom.
But no, that was a great moment, because it just felt like you can imagine that happening. That just seems so real,
It did.
you know?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that was great.
Right.
But what was the emotional tax on you, like, writing this? Because, like, revisiting these moments, and I imagine that not the easiest in the world, with some of the things that happened. So how was that? How did that impact, like, this whole process?
It was very inspirational. It was also very kind of, it brought some peace to me also, looking back at these events, at my father's death, and our path in life, the way our family was divided between America and Russia and Armenia, kind of. Um, it helped me kind of bring it all together and reconcile with it. Uh, it was kind of a very cathartic experience. I think that's one of the favorite words that artsy people use. It was catharsis. It was very cleansing and very peaceful for me, kind of to look at it, and to see people react to it, to see that people identify with it. It was a great feeling. It's great that when you can share something with people, you think you've observed something, you've seen something, and then you see other people react to it. And I like it.
Mm. Yeah, no, that must be, yeah, after put all the time it takes to create something, and
Right.
like you always have that, like, are people gonna like it? Should I have done this more, or should I have done that? Or, and
Yeah.
then when people first view, there must be that just relief that it's out in the world, but then
Oh yeah.
that people are like, "Oh, I really enjoyed that. Great job."
Yeah, it's a very exhilarating moment. It's very nerve-wracking when you first see your film on the screen, even when you do like a test screening for your friends. My advice to future filmmakers would be to like do some shots and shoot some scenes, just put it all together and show it to people and get feedback early on, because it's very hard. The movie, my editor, Brian Colvin, is a brilliant guy. He told me at some point the film tells you what it needs. You get to the
Mm,
point where you look at the film and it's very clear to you what it needs. And it's very clear to you like this scene wasn't really needed. Could have been very short. And this scene is where you should have focused more. This is where you get the stuff that you need. So it's very exhilarating to show it for the first time, even to your friends, and get their objective opinion, and then work on it more. And of course, they say the movie is born several times. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. The first time it's born when you write the script. The second time, in my opinion, is when you cast it, because these people then own your characters. They pretty much own your film from that point on. The third time, of course, when it's shot. The fourth time when it's edited. Each of these stages can change the film completely,
mm,
editing especially. And the fifth time, I think music is also super important in a film. So that's my, again, I'm not pretending to be Martin Scorsese. By the way, my mom calls him Nicolas Sarkozy. She always gets them confused, the president of France and Scorsese. And she's just that kind of a quirky woman. But I don't pretend to be him. But this is just something I learned from my process.
mm. So, like, coming into this, being a first time writer and this being your first, like, feature film, what inspiration did you take? Like, did you use, you know, people's work that you enjoyed as a reference point? Like, have you watched films and thought, I'd like that kind of shot in my film, or that was a great sequence. That's a great way to start, or that's a great way to finish. And like, did you do that, or was this solely kind of thinking about the story that you wanted to tell and going, I think it needs this, and I think it needs that?
Well, it's an excellent question. Yes, I try to be very thorough, and I try to learn a lot from other filmmakers. I'm a film buff anyway, so I have a lot of points of reference in film. Probably not as many as someone who has a like professional film education, but I do watch a lot of movies. So yes, there were some films on a similar theme, for example, that I tried to learn from. For example, there's an old movie Kolya with a very similar theme about a Russian guy stuck in Prague. There's also a very famous film, Goodbye Lenin, an excellent film, wonderful film, similar sensibility and similar theme. I tried to learn a little bit from it. I mean, you don't want to steal, but
Mm,
it's okay to learn. And yes, then I tried to do like a little storyboard, but different one, not just with sketches, but shots from different movies and kind of conveying the feeling that these shots had. You know, every filmmaker, I think, has his or her own language. Every
yeah.
film has a language, and you try to learn from films that have similar language. You try to get some ideas without stealing, yeah, but you want to learn from them. You learn from cinematography, you learn from dialogue, you learn from some of the shots. So yes, there's a lot went into it. And I try to be very thorough because I was very conscious of the fact this is my first one.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was speaking to a British director, Jack Spring, whose film yeah, it's out this week. Well,
Right,
it would have been last week once this comes.
right,
But yeah, he like the interesting thing was he didn't come to film through like just being this, huge lover of film, watching films. He enjoys film, but it actually started because his dad, there was a period where his dad was unemployed, and so they him and the kids would come home from school, and his dad had in the garden set up like a camera, and they'd make stop animation films. So that was his kind of education and way into things. And
right.
so it's just like, I think there's no right or wrong way. You know what I mean? Like you can take inspiration from people, you can kind of learn in there's so many different ways. But I think when there's a real passion for what you're doing, that comes through. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah,
that's the big thing. And you know, I think this being such a personal story to you, that you can feel that this was something that you really wanted to kind of put out in the world.
right, right. And hopefully people would identify with some of the elements of it, and perhaps get inspired by it.
Well, I think like an interesting kind of thing is like that this, Andrei, yourself, right? The like being at that point where you have everything and every life is pretty good, but then it all falls apart. It's like realizing that wait, you know how to move forward, right? There's all of
Mm.
these things that were given to you from family and upbringing as a kid, all these lessons, but you
Right.
just have to remember those. It's like there's a scene in the hospital room, and it's like, oh, if Meninas's family don't give up. You keep going and
Yeah.
fighting. And it's just like, yeah, it's you can feel like everything is against you, but it's just remembering little things like that that can go, no, 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 there's still things I can do. So I think
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot in this film, like regardless of your background, you know what I
Yep.
mean? If you're Russian, English, Jamaican, African, like it doesn't really matter. Like you can take that from this, right? Because I think everyone's been in a situation where they felt like everything's up against them.
Well, yeah, I hope it came through. It was a time, a very tough time for a lot of Americans, a lot of people all around the world, the financial crisis. It did crush a lot of people.
Mm,
And a lot of people did what I did, moved in with their families and tried to survive and make it through. It was the Great Depression. It was the Great Depression. They wouldn't call it that, but we actually went through another Great Depression.
yeah.
And it made me really appreciate what's important in life. I mean, one day you think you're a millionaire, the other day you're counting your pocket change to make sure you can buy coffee before you go to see your dad at the hospital. So it was a life-changing experience, and it really teaches you some lessons, and you start appreciating things that you didn't know that you had to appreciate.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. I we yeah, we've been through a few recessions in the UK,
Oh yeah,
and it's funny because they don't necessarily want to call them recessions, but it's just like this is a recession. And I think there was one point in the late 90s and we had two back to back. But because like we never got out of the first one,
right.
but then the next one hits, but they don't want to really call it the recession, and so
Yes,
it's
it's very
tough.
political. They don't want to
Mm,
use that word, and they called this one the Great Recession, not to call it the Great Depression, because by a lot of according to a lot of sources, and if you look at the data, it was pretty close. I mean, you could see people lining up. In DC, there was a vacancy apparently to take care of the elephant at the zoo. And 1,000 people showed up and stood in the line. I mean, you call this depression? I do. I think it was the Great Depression. It made me kind of reevaluate some of the things that I valued so much about the Western way of life, and reevaluate some of the things from the other country.
Mm.
It really puts things into perspective for you. Um, but I didn't want to make a political film. I just wanted to tell a story and then have people ruminate over it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that is, you know, in any sort of recession, there's depression, right?
Yeah,
Because when people have lost jobs, you know, they may have lost their livelihood as well, but it's just like, to a lot of people, the job is the identity, right? This is the thing. You get up in the morning, you're there 8+ hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes more.
right, right,
So that's what you do. So you take
right.
that away, then, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I? What do I do? What's my purpose now?
Right, right. It's a crushing blow to your pride, to your identity, as you said, to your dignity, because first of all, what makes it very difficult is it's kind of like the invisible enemy. You don't see where the enemy is, but
Mm,
he's just destroying everybody's life. And it's not like you got attacked by an army, or you got bombed or something. You don't see it physically. Everything looks okay, but it's this invisible enemy that's destroying your life, and it's also very humbling because you have this sense of loss of identity, and you fear that you'll end up in the street. And some people who didn't have family members to move in with, they did. And
yeah.
yeah, it was a very trying time for many Americans, people all around the world, and they'll have documentaries made about it as well. And the funny thing is, apparently not a lot has changed in the financial system, and
Mm.
not a lot of people were punished for what they did. So
Well, that's the problem,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because people, if in our jobs, right, we did some of the things that these, financial institutes did, we're sacked. That's gross misconduct. We're done.
absolutely, absolutely,
But they get
absolutely.
bailouts, during the pandemic. All these big businesses who you think would have, the backup fund, right?
Right,
They all
right,
got handouts, but the
right.
small family businesses got nothing. And you're thinking, if
That's
anyone's getting handouts, it should be the family-owned small independent businesses, because the big businesses, they've got all these assets, they've got all this, you know, supposedly they're meant to have these, slush funds to help with these situations, so they don't need it. But yeah,
You're
it
quite
is
right. That's one of the most frustrating things about it, was that only the big guys got rescued. There was even, I think, either a book or a film made called "Too Big to Fail," which criticized this kind of approach. You only save the big guys, so you don't really care about tens of millions of people who are ending up in the street. But you're only saving the big companies. That's
Mhm.
one of the things that made me think really hard about the kind of this type of capitalism, and I'm not sure that's an ideal system. Far from it. You're rescuing the guys who created this mess, but you're not helping tens of millions of people who are losing their houses, ending up in the street. If you and I conceal £500 or $500 in our tax income returns, we'd have a big problem with
Yeah.
the IRS, or I don't know what the IRS is in Britain. But these guys got away with swindling billions and billions and billions of dollars, and then they got rescued. Then they
Mm.
got bought out. And that's one of the things that made me sharply question this particular model of kind of financial capitalism.
Yeah. I think when you look at all of these kind of models, communism, like capitalism, they're all flawed,
Oh, yeah,
right? Because humans are involved.
absolutely.
And it's just like because technically when you look at like a communism, you think, oh, that should be ideal, right? Because everything's shared fairly and everything's like this. Or,
Mm, far from it.
capitalism would be like, oh, if you work hard, you can get this. But it's never that, because there's always that person controlling it all going, but I want more, right? I want
Absolutely.
the advantages. And so that's what messes everything up. You think you've got a perfect model, but no, someone's going to mess it.
Yes, exactly. I think one thing is pretty clear. There is no perfect model.
No.
Capitalism is not perfect. Communism is very far from perfect because human nature is the same. The greed is the same. Selfishness and greed will always be part of human nature, sadly, in any country. So in the end, I guess that's kind of the message we're hoping to send with this movie, that it really doesn't matter what country you're in or what your political system is called. In the end, they're people who have compassion. They're people who help each other. They're family members, they're friends, real friends who come together at a time like this. And maybe that's what's more important than your politics.
Yeah, no, I mean, just seeing the way that, the hospital staff
Oh
helped,
yeah,
that that must have been crazy. Because, being in a
oh yeah,
situation, being told that, "Oh, we're discharging your dad, we're sending him back,
all
we've got
right.
him a flight back home," when it's
All right.
just like, that's a death sentence. Like, what are you
It
doing?
is. It was, and I must say, I'm still so grateful and so blown away by the compassion and humanity of all those doctors and nurses who helped my father. I mean, he did have insurance, but the insurance expired. The insurance expired in a couple of weeks, I think. So in the end, these people were just helping us out of their pocket for
Mm,
several months, and the costs were astronomical. I mean, that's another thing that I certainly don't want to go into detail, but as you know, the medical system in the United States is a mess. It's a big old mess,
yeah.
and President Obama tried to make it his main project. But yeah, but in the end, I mean, we these people helped us so much, and they took care of us, took care of me and my father. Otherwise, we would have ended up in the street, literally. So we're very, very grateful. And again, it's the people that matter. It's humanity, that compassion that transcends national borders. You know, in any country, we have that.
Mm, mm. And with all of this, right, and this being, you know, a life, things that happen to you, how was the casting? Right, because I
Right.
imagine that, like, casting anything is, difficult, but
Yes.
casting something that is a representation of your life, right? This
Right.
snapshot in time, you now want to do it complete justice, right? Have people that actually resemble these people that, and not just resemble, because then they've got to be able to carry that character, make them come
Yes.
to life, make it real, right? So
Yes.
how was that process for you?
Well, it's very, very important. I think casting is one of the most important aspects of making a film. For me, the physical resemblance wasn't as important, although some physical similarity would certainly have helped. I mean, one thing we got right was the mother. It's hard to believe that there are two different actresses playing the mother, because the mother from the past is played by Lily Vartan, the Armenian actress here, and of course, our wonderful Marina Sirtis is the star of the film. She's playing the mother later on, and they're so strikingly similar that some people
Mm,
just think it's the same actress, but they live in different countries. They don't know each other. They speak different languages. It's amazing. So that match worked. Less so for the father and for the main character, but at that point, it was for me. It was important just to match them physically as much as possible. But for me, it was the sensibility of the actor that mattered more than the physical resemblance. And at some point, I just needed to separate myself from the story and just look at it as a story and as characters, and not demand that it resemble everything that I have seen, and it doesn't need to be just exactly like it was. Or I just wanted to let the story take a life of its own, and like the
yeah.
film take life of its own. I think it was important at some point to separate. Otherwise, it would be like a ill-made documentary, which I didn't want to do. Right.
So how long did the whole casting process take, would you say?
Well, I think we spent about a month on it. I mean, looking back, of course, should have taken more time, but we were very lucky with the actors. They were great actors. And it's very hard on a limited budget, and especially when you're in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, and you're competing with much, much larger studios, although not for the same actors, but whatever. Why
Mm,
not? I mean, some of the actors are actually very much in demand. So you don't have the luxury of doing this for months and months. You know, you just have a certain amount of time you have to get on everybody's schedule. So there is this kind of pressure. But we spent a month doing it. Next time, I'm certainly going to spend a few months doing it. But still, we're very lucky with the actors. I think they're wonderful people, very cooperative. great actors, and they were very enthusiastic about the script. And
Mm.
this is when your film is born again. It's very striking how you write a script, you imagine certain things a certain way, and then once you cast your film, then these actors take possession of the story. Like they take ownership of your film. And from that point on, they are kind of co-creating with you. They're collaborating with you. Absolutely, they are. And it's probably one of the most important decisions about your film's casting. Incredibly important.
Yeah, I definitely can imagine. Like, what like, can you think of some significant changes that might have occurred with the script and story once you cast?
After the casting, well, at that point, it was difficult to make radical changes because then you have your schedule, and your producer will not be happy if you start changing all these things around, and rightly so because we're all in a tight budget. We're basically flying by the seat of our pants, I think is the expression in English. The
Mhm.
idioms are still coming to me. So yeah, it's yeah, you're trying to make every penny count, and you're running around. So you sleep 4 hours a day. So at that point, really changing the script and changing the shooting schedule is a luxury you probably cannot afford. But sometimes the dialogue, the actors would do their own dialogue. I would ask them to just say what they feel they should say, and we let some scenes go a little bit longer. But I really think collaborating with talented actors is a great way to do it. And I from some of the movies I like from the past, and most of the movies are old, the ones that I like, I heard that that's actually a lot of directors work that way. I mean,
Mm.
in a very famous movie which I love, Kramer versus Kramer, apparently the director asked Meryl Streep to write her own monologue in the courthouse, and it was brilliant. It's
Ah.
absolutely brilliant. And of course, she's Meryl Streep, of course. And this is an Oscar-winning movie, and that's at the time when the Oscars meant a lot. So, yeah,
Yeah, I've definitely heard a lot of directors say that there's times when depending on how much time you have, like on that day or
right,
period
right.
of the shoot, you might go, okay, we're gonna shoot the script lines, and then it's just like, now say what you feel, and they'll shoot
Right.
another version with that, and then see what works, you
Right.
know?
It's great to give your actors some options. Sometimes they would, first of all, never tell your actors what kind of emotion they should have because that's not directing. You can't do that. That's, they're just representing a certain emotion or indicating. You can't do that. You can't tell them be funny, be sad. That's terrible. So you need to give them an objective, tell them what's happening, give them a little bit of the backstory, give them an
Mm, mm,
objective, and then they may have a couple of ideas. And I think it's very important to let them go with it and give them some options. This is one way of doing it. This is another way of doing it. Try a little bit of this, try a little bit of that, give them an idea. It's a wonderful creative process. It's magical. When it works with the right people, it's this magical process of creating something beautiful together. And it's wonderful. It's a great feeling.
mm. Arthur, I've got to say, right, for this being your first feature, like you are talking like, you know what I mean? A dude that's been in the game for a while. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
hey, you're making a lot of sense. And some of the things you're saying, right? I've spoken to directors that have done a few films and they say
right.
the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, you know what I
Thank
mean?
you.
Like
It's kind of you
you
to say. I
you've
try to
done
be
some
very
work on
thorough
it.
and be very humble. I think it's very important to be humble, hardworking, and thorough and learn. And I think about 70% of your film is preparation. You need to be very thoroughly prepared with all of
Mm,
it. You need to revise your script as many times as it takes. You need to get it just right. You need to cast it for a long time. You cannot rush. You cannot rush. And then you have to prepare a realistic schedule. Realistic schedule. You're not going to shoot 15 scenes a day. If you put that on your schedule, you're set for a disaster. You're setting yourself up for a failure. You can't do that. You have to be realistic. You have to prepare it, carefully choose your locations, carefully plan everything. And once you plan it, then it takes a life of its own. So you need to be very thorough. It's there's my editor. I always refer to him as a very smart guy, Brian. He says there's the fantasy of making a movie, and then there's the reality of making a movie. And most people want to live in the fantasy. They just think they're going to become rich and famous and hang out with stars and go to a pool party in Hollywood Hills, and that's what 70% of Los Angeles thinks it is.
That's not what happened.
No, no, it does not. But they will not leave this fantasy. They don't want to look at the reality of making a film,
Mm,
because most people, they would spend decades trying to get into the movie industry. But you can make wonderful films just being prepared, and
yeah.
it just takes a lot of work. And there's a way to do it. You don't have to just walk on Santa Monica Boulevard waiting to be discovered. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's a
Mm,
fairy
mm.
tale, right? So, there's the reality of making a film, and I always try to be very thorough. So, like I said, script, super important. Revise it as many times as you feel like it, and show it to people, and not to your mom, because your mom is always going to tell you you're a genius. You need to show, especially my mom. You need to show it to people. Get criticism, and don't be afraid of criticism, because criticism helps you improve. Because once it goes on that big screen, it's very scary, because you can't change anything anymore. So change
Mm.
it and improve it as many times as you want, and choose talented actors. I would even do some test shots. I would pre-shoot some scenes with the actors, because what you see at the audition during the audition and what you see during the shoot are totally different things. An actor behaves very differently during the audition and during the shoot.
Yeah.
And once you do a test shoot, you will see a totally different side of that person that you can work with. Also, beware of small parts, because sometimes actors who come to the audition, and they get a very small part, and they think this is their to be or not to be moment, and they start acting like this in the middle of the shoot, and you can't do anything. You're just gonna run around. No, no, no! Please don't do it this way, please, sir. Your breakfast, it has been served. Like, please don't say it this way. Please don't do it. So be careful of that. That can happen. A lot of other funny things can happen. A lot of people underestimate the importance of the sound. You can do that. I mean, we had to reshoot some of the scenes because there were some problems with the sound. You have to be
Mm.
very careful with the sound. Can't underestimate it. Rehearse with your actors, I would say. Super important. Rehearse with your actors and pre-shoot some scenes. Then you'll be ready for it. There are a lot of tips, but I don't want to overwhelm you.
No, I think people will find that really helpful, man, for sure. Like, I think you said something very important earlier about, not being like, be happy, like, be sad, right? So when you're filming this, or just preparing the actors to play these roles, did you kind of sit down and say, okay, so my dad was this type of person and he'd have these mannerisms, and was it kind of this, or did you give people music to kind of set the mood for a certain scene? Like, how did you prepare people, for all of this?
That's an excellent point. Music is a great way to direct people, and I love music. I didn't use that particular way of doing it, but I know some directors have done it, and it's great. Most of the actors were interested in the backstory. How did things happen? What was this person doing? What was his objective? For example, the scene where the mother comes to the hospital. It's wonderful. I mean, Marina was wonderful, and Alex was amazing too. And I just told them what it was like. For imagine you're this person, and you had all these, you know, things from the past, and arguments and conflicts, and you're looking at each other, but you don't want to say it, because in this situation you really can't. This is the time to forgive,
Mm,
and you just, I just put it in your eyes, put it in your soul, and just do it. And they did a wonderful job. Marina was amazing. That's the magic. It's so magical when you can communicate it to another person, and then they take it and they create something with it, and you're looking at it, it's like, wow, this was amazing. Marina was really good, and Alex also, and so were the others. Wonderful actors, wonderful actors.
yeah, that really was a really just great scene, because
Yes,
there was so much that was said, but not with words. Like the placement of the chair, right? Like how far it was away, like putting, the cloth in the top, and just all of these little points, right? Just these
right,
little points.
right,
They
right,
just said so much about their relationship.
right.
You know,
Our
it,
second director made a great point, Matt. He said this is like the truce, when the mother puts the white napkin on the father. It's kind of a sign of truce,
mm,
reconciliation, right? Right now, we're reconciling. We're not gonna
yeah.
bring up the past. It was a great scene. They did it very well. It's really magical when you work with talented actors and they collaborate with you. It's a wonderful feeling.
Mm. And with a scene like that, right? So, you plan out, your shots and everything like that, but like, did you envision it coming out like that? Or did you just kind of give them the vibe and that's what they produced?
I gave them the vibe, and that's what they produced. I kind of envisioned it, but they added a lot more to it. And that's one thing that I had to accept, and probably other first time directors will have to accept. What you see as your film before shooting and what it turns out to be will probably be different things. It doesn't mean that you don't have to plan. You have to plan very, very, very thoroughly, but you still have to allow for the film to start taking a life of its own.
Mm. Yeah. No, for sure. And, again, like, you mentioned that the score, right? The music of the film is
Yeah,
very
super
important.
important.
And so how was that collaboration? Did because I think when you were talking about the storyboard, and a few directors have said this, that it's not just, they don't just draw it. They'll use scenes and other kind of multimedia to kind of display what they're trying to do with
Right,
these scenes. So with the
right.
music, did you use past scores or just music that you like and be like, I envision that for this? Or like,
Right,
how was this for you?
right. It's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. It's very difficult. We had very talented composers we work with, and some good music that we just got ready made. But it's a very delicate, very personal, and very mystical process because you cannot explain or describe music. You can't do it. Music has its own language,
Mm,
and the closest thing you can do is maybe like for me at least. Maybe there are the other directors who know how to do it. I don't think you can explain music or say, I want this to be this way, then I want it to be that way. No, music has its own language. So what you can do is either get some things that were already written or show an example to your composer and then have the composer do something similar. But that's kind of limiting his creativity.
mm,
It's very difficult. That part is very difficult. I would say work with good composers, and for me it would be easier just to take something that they already created or show them something that they have done and say, "Oh, something like this, but along those lines." Because words cannot describe music. An art of its own, and it's not something you can storyboard. You can't do that. So it's a difficult process.
mm. And was it kind of like, did it work instantly, or was there a lot of back
No,
and forth to try and get what you needed?
there was a lot of back and forth. It was a long process, very long process. A little bit of a perfectionist with a small budget, which is why it took so long to make this film. One of the guys I worked with, our DP Ricardo, on another film, he said it's either cheap. So it's cheap, fast, and good. Choose two out of three. You can two out of three. You probably heard this one.
Yeah.
So if you want it done well, you don't have a lot of money, then it's going to take a while. And you enjoy the process. You don't have to rush. If you're just trying to impress your girlfriend or go to a party in Hollywood Hills, you are doing this movie for for the wrong reasons. Don't do it for those reasons. Take your time. But yes, the musical process was very difficult, very long, very difficult. But in the end, I think it came out all right.
Mm. Yeah, it wasn't obtrusive. Like, I think sometimes you can watch something and it feels very much like, this is where you feel sad and this is
Exactly
where you
right.
feel
Exactly
happy, and
right.
it's just like,
Exactly right.
"Ay,
I
I
know
can
exactly
get
what you
that
mean, and I
from what's
hate
on
it.
screen," you
I
know?
know exactly what you mean. Sometimes you feel like somebody's squeezing the tear out of you. It's just kind of guiding your emotions, forcing you to feel a certain way. It should not be that way, in my
Mm.
opinion. I mean, there are other people who have other opinions. In my opinion, it should be very subtle and mystical. It should not be direct, linear. Like feel happy, feel sad, etc., etc.
Um, so, now the film is done, right? Just putting it out into the world. Like,
Right.
what a like, can you look at it and think the things that you might have wanted to change, and and like the things that you're just like that you're really proud of.
Well, yeah, there are some parts of it that feel a little bit stronger to you, some parts of it that feel weaker to you. But it's important, I think, not to get into that mode because I have been in that mode for years and you can't torture yourself. You can improve it. You can work with an editor to improve some things. Music can do a lot. Also, sometimes use special effects, to correct some things. But you can't beat yourself up and you can't agonize over it. There is a point where you have to stop telling people how it was filmed and why this was difficult and why, you didn't have enough time at the gym, to shoot that scene, or the truck came late, or that day somebody didn't show up, or the mic didn't work. You can't do this. I mean, you start doing this, and for some time, it's normal, and you tell your story to people, but in the end, they don't want to know. In the end, this is what you came up with. This is the result. You have to accept it. And of course, there are things that can be done better. I think in pretty much any situation, there are always some things you can do better. But there's a point where you have to stop thinking about it and stop telling stories and apologizing. Understand that people will just perceive it the way it is, and that's what you that's what you take, and you move forward with it. And you put it out into the world, as you said.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's true. That's very true. I re You mentioned the gym. I really like the scene where he has the nightmare, because I
Yes,
don't think I've seen it kind of depicted like that before. But I was just
right.
like, oh man, that just feels like it. Yeah, that intense, crazy. Like all you're doing is trying to run and stay. And yeah, I thought, oh man,
I
that's
had
a
that
good.
idea when I was at the gym.
Ah,
That's why I'm saying it's good to like always have something to write on so that
mm,
when the idea comes to you, you can take it down. I had this
yes.
idea when I was in my gym in West Hollywood. Right. I hope it did. I'm glad that you liked it. I'm glad it came through.
Yeah, no, I thought that worked really well.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because you had the dream sequences and you had like the flashbacks.
Right,
Like
right, right.
with the flashbacks, how did you decide what moments to kind of show in that respect?
Well, it wasn't easy. I tried to first you think about everything that you want to bring in, but you have to decide between things where this scene, this particular memory has a bearing on the particular character. It tells you something about the character, or it's part of the story. I guess the phrase is move the story forward.
Mm,
It has to be something that moves the story forward, that's integral to the character. It tells you something about the character or the story, and you can't do too many of them. It is challenging to work with flashbacks, and the initial structure of the film wasn't the structure that you see now. It
right.
didn't start. It started with the Soviet footage rather than American footage. So it was very hard. This part was hard to decide how do you structure it. And my actor Rudolph, the lead actor, had his ideas, and in the end I accepted his ideas. So it made a lot more sense. You also have to remember that you know more about your story than other people. You assume they know, but they
Mm,
don't know. So it's good to listen to people who are looking at it objectively and saying, well, at this point, it's not, it doesn't make sense. Maybe you should do it this way. It's important to listen. You don't have to accept every suggestion, but I think it's important to listen because people can, quote, save you from yourself. It's also important because you assume that everyone knows what you know. It's not true. And you may
yeah,
be wrong. You may be wrong. No one is 100%. So the structure was something that was difficult for me to set. In the end, it changed. This is not how I thought it would be, but in the end, everyone agreed this is the best way to do it. We'll do it this way.
right. Ah, interesting. Interesting. And lengthwise, because yeah, when I was speaking to Jack the other day, he was just like, I don't want to make a film over an hour and a half.
That's right. I think
So
so. I think that's the right rule of thumb. Yeah.
so for you, that the length is important.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. I wasn't thinking that way, but yes, in the end, I knew I had a limit. I think I was at 85 pages. And there's a rule like a page is a minute. Like a
Mm.
Hollywood page in the right format is approximately a minute, more or less. It's not certainly not precise. I mean, you can have two people sitting at a table. That's one kind of scene, and you can have those flashbacks with a boy running in the field and monasteries, etc. That's a lot more than a minute.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's approximately right. I would say yes. You don't want it too long. You don't want it to be more than like an hour and 30 minutes, unless you are a world famous director and everybody's going to sit there and sit through your movie. But there's no danger of that with me. So
Okay. So, I mean, you have indicated, right? I think earlier you said casting, you'll give yourself more time next time, right? So
yes,
that tells me that yeah, you're planning on making more movies and the like.
hopefully. I mean, this is a big project. It's a huge project, and then there's post production. There's post production.
Mm,
It can take a long time. I guess if you're realistic about what you want to do, and if you work, willing to work hard, and you're not going to live in a fantasy, then yes, it's definitely worth it. If you enjoy the creative process, then it's definitely worth it. But if you want, you want a fantasy of making a movie, and want to sell your house and use that money to make your first film, that's you want to think about that very carefully, I would say.
oh dear. But you enjoyed the process all in all.
Yes, it was a long process. We shot the first. There was the first shoot in principal photography, as they say, in Los Angeles. Then we had to shoot the Soviet scenes back in Armenia. Then we did some pickup shots in Los Angeles. Then we did some pickup shots in Armenia. So even though this was a small budget and a small movie, I mean, we shot in two countries for like almost 2 years or 3 years because we had to do all these pickups.
Right.
I mean, Rudolph was even joking. He was saying, the main actor was saying, "Arthur, you probably want me to grow up so I can play my own father. Is that your intention?" He was quite funny. And then we did the post production in Moscow. We did some pickup shots there. It's so funny. We had American actors playing Russians, and then later on in Moscow we had Russians playing Americans. It was very funny. We even had to work with some Americans who lived in Moscow, which are perfectly authentic. So it's amazing. It's amazing. It's such a small film, but the scope of it was huge, huge. We worked with several teams in Los Angeles, here in Armenia, in Moscow. Um, so even that the scope of it, interacting with so many people, so many creative people, was very pleasant. I think if
Mm,
you enjoy the process, this is definitely something for you. Just watch your budget because it's becoming very, very difficult to sell movies. So you
mm,
don't want to spend more money than you can recoup. And I would say, go low. Start with a micro budget, do a short, do like a micro budget film, try to sell it, and then you'll be a lot more realistic about what you can expect. But if you create a script and you put, I don't know, Adele's song in it, and you plan for $50 million, it's nice. It's nice to dream, but no one's going to give you that money, and Adele is not going to agree to have your song in it, and you can't cast a star in your film, A-list star, when just that is going to cost you tens of millions of dollars. You got to be realistic. You want to be a dreamer, or you want to be an indie filmmaker. If you want to be an indie filmmaker, there's a way to do it. It's fine. You just have to be realistic.
mm. And with everything that you knew coming in,
Right.
right? Was it still this? Was there still stuff that really surprised you about this whole process?
Yes, definitely. There's nothing like experience. And I would definitely advise people to do a short film or work on somebody else's film and see how the set works. Because nothing can prepare you for this. It's a very intense experience with dozens of people working in sync with each other. It is a process with many, many, many layers. It's like a cake, many layers. You will always be surprised, I think, when you first set. You need to prepare. You need to prepare very thoroughly as a director. There's a lot you can read. Go to some acting classes so that you can learn on yourself what kind of direction works with the actors and what doesn't. It's one of the most important things you will have to do as a director, direct actors. So take a couple of acting classes, watch some other directors work on somebody else's set, do a short, get as much experience as possible, read, And even after that, there will be a lot of things that will be very surprising for you,
Mm.
because it's like getting on a train, fast moving train. Once you get on it, there's no stopping it. You need to do everything in your power to get ready for that experience, I say.
Man, this has been really interesting, Arthur.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for your time. No, because I did. I just thought, you know, watching the film, right? There's so much that you can get from it, right? It didn't matter what your background was. Like the core values and lessons are just universal. So I really think it can speak to so many people, and just these great little moments, like in the hospital, and just all of these really nice. It just felt like this character-driven, really kind of
Yes.
poignant story.
Yes,
So
that's the word most people use. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Kevin. I
no, no, no,
apologize.
no, it's cool, man.
No, that's what most people said. It's very character driven. They loved there was some truth to it. There was truth to the characters of the story, and a lot of people identified with the characters. Everyone has family, and everyone has gone through some hard times, and some of the characters were quite quirky, like the mother's character and Ellen. They loved them so much. So yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad it amounted to something, and I hope that people will find it interesting, perhaps be inspired by some parts of it, um, and hopefully we'll be able to continue with our projects. Maybe do another one in the future if I summon the courage for it. It's a huge project. People need to understand it's a huge project. It's a lot of work. It's not just about being, looking cool and being rich and famous. So there's a lot more to this.
Well, you did a really good job, man. So
Thank you,
yeah,
Kevin.
you should definitely be proud of this. Like,
Thank you very much.
how can people like keep track of what you're doing, man? Where can people find you? Let everyone know.
Well, I mean, I am on IMDb. We have a Facebook page for the film and a website. We're still working kind of on a website for my own kind of page, but I think right now just the film, the Crossing website, and the Facebook page for the film would be a good place to start. And hopefully soon I'm already thinking about the next project, and it's going to probably take some time because you know me, I like to be thorough and take my time with things, although I don't have a lot of time left. But yeah, hopefully I'll do another project. I'll be happy to keep you posted. Thank you very much for your kind words and for very insightful questions.
Wow, man, it's been a pleasure. And yeah,
My pleasure.
when you got that new project ready, yeah, be sure to come back and we can have another conversation, man.
Thank you. And I'll remember to plug in my computer ahead of time. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Hey,
I
no problem.
apologize.
Have a
Thanks a
great
lot.
day, man.
All right.
And
You
all
too.
the success with this film.
Thanks, Kevin. It's kind of you.
All right, man. Bye.